Good morning, friend. Uncertainty. This basic 50 questions policy play in shielding EU from unfair. Third, could strategic autonomy facing dual pressures from China and slowing EU demand. Fifth, are current EU tariffs sufficient to counter Chinese state subsidized exports? Six, should the EU accelerate green tech localization to regions access financing amid rising trade volatility? 8. What impact do Chinese? 9. Can digital trade agreements is the EU's de-risking strategy? How does China's Belt and Road to wealth? Should the EU impose stricter anti? 13th, what lessons can the EU learn from the US? How can the EBRD foster regional value chains to reduce dependencies? 15th, are EU subsidies for domestic industries compliant with WTO rules amid rising protectionism? 16th, could joint EU EBRD infrastructure investments counterbalance Chinese influence in the Balkans? 18th, should the EU prioritize trade diversification over confrontation with China? 19th, what role does intellectual property theft play in China's export advantage? 20th, can the EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism, that means CBAM, level the playing field against Chinese exporters? 21. How might geopolitical tensions in the effective EU trade flows? 22. Are EBRD countries prepared decoupling between China and Western markets? 23rd, should the EU fast track accession talks with Eastern them into resilient trade blocs? 24th, how can labor standards be leveraged as? 25th, that the EU dual strategy of engagement and containment with China create policy contradictions? 26. Can public-private partnership boost innovation to outpace Chinese export quality? 27. How might AI and automation reshape EU competitiveness in export? 28. Should the EBRD expand its trade facilitation programs amid? 29. What impact do US export controls on China have on EU? 30th, could a pan-European China domestic economic slowdown in 32? Are EU consumers willing to pay more for 34? How can the EU ensure critical raw materials? Can regularity alignment with the US? 37. How might democratic preferences on human rights and environmental standards? 39. What role the state-owned enterprises play in distorting China-EU trade competition? 40. Could regional innovation hubs funded by the should the EU develop a friend shoring strategy? 43. Can circular economy models? 44. How might climate related this? 45. Does the EU's emphasis on EBRD countries adopt EU style digital services? 47. How can vocational training programs align with future export sector needs? 48. Could joint EU-China standards on 50? Ultimately, can the EU balance work? Subscribe and comment this script photos I produced. You will see and find out the photos. Trade flow increases. Investment region growth. EBRD investments grow. EU policy meets EBRD. EU policy meets. Same EU policy meets EBRD. Navigating trade. CBAM customs duties compared. CBAM impact analyzed. Trade war looms. EU export squeezed. Navigating uncertainty. The lost word of the getting manufacturing showdown. West versus East. EU innovations. EU export growth. China surges ahead. EU versus China. Friends, please like, subscribe and comment. Thank you. Thank you very much.